how's it going? Dan Stoltzfus, Dax Ferguson here. So today we have the privilege of having Mark Kenny on with us. And so Mark's the founder and, I don't know, what do you call yourself, president, CEO?
You call me whatever. I think co-founder pretty much.
Co-founder of Think Multifamily. So Think Multifamily is, for those of y'all who might not know, is a syndication group. And it's a group that I joined about maybe 3 years ago as I was transitioning my company to fit the multifamily space. I joined there. And so Mark had the, I don't know if we'll call it a privilege or the dishonor or,
privilege.
Or what,
it's privilege
of teaching me how to analyze deals. And that's knowledge I'll take with me for the rest of my life, and I appreciate greatly. So I would recommend anybody, if you're interested or thinking about joining the multifamily space in any way, whether passive investor or whatever, that you get with Mark and pick his brain at least, and maybe think about joining his group.
Yeah, so I've known Mark for, oh goodness,
6 years maybe? I'd say 6.
I think it's about 6 years. And guy that worked for me at the time introduced me to Mark, and we had the opportunity to meet and talk, and it's been great, getting to know you as a person, and also the Think Multifamily family that you are. But I know a lot about your history and your past, but I think it's vital to who you are today and why you're doing what you're doing today. So tell us a little bit, kind of where you started, your life story,
right,
and all that.
So one of 7 kids. Actually, my mom had 8 at one point, so she had 8 kids in less than 9 years, one shy of Dax's 9. But I have 4 sisters and then 2 brothers. So I have an identical twin. Grew up in Michigan, live in Dallas now. My big thing was growing up, my dad worked his butt off. He had 2 jobs. He'd be gone sometimes 100 hours a week because he's a firefighter and then worked at a lumber yard. So worked his butt off. My mom worked hard, obviously, with all the kids and things like that. And we didn't have anything extra. So my parents weren't out blowing money. Just didn't have the money. So as a pretty young kid, I remember telling my mom that this stinks, Mom. I'm probably, this sucks. Or I'm probably going to say that. But it stinks not having any money. We're buying our own shoes. When we're little. We're buying our own bikes when we're 10 years old. And I told her I'm never going to have my kids ever go through this. And, you kind of make those statements, and then it definitely was a big driver. We were talking right before the show, too, about how money can somewhat drive you, and that's good and bad. Sometimes it can be something that owns you, but for me, it was a driver to basically have money where my kids wouldn't have to worry about, whether they're going to have, I'd say a little bit extras, too, not just like the necessities. So my twin brother and I were both analytical, went to school together, became CPAs. And we started looking at real estate when we were seniors in college, more like 2 to 4 units, smaller properties. People are like, why did you do that? I don't know. We didn't have everyone in our family doing it. My dad wasn't doing it. There was nobody, aunts and uncles doing it. It was one of those things we both were like, well, people need a place to live. So didn't really know what we were doing, but we started looking at properties, and then we put a property under contract, and we took our dad with us, which was probably good and bad. He provided advice, but there wasn't a property that we looked at ever that made sense for him. Every single property was like, it's overpriced or this or that, and we spent a lot of time. So we ended up stopped taking my dad with us on properties, and then we bought our first property, and I told my dad after we bought it, he wasn't contributing either financially, so we did that, actually, and that was when we were seniors in college. I was CPA for a while, and then did IT consulting, and continued to buy small properties, just like 2 to 4 units. We were in Michigan at the time, got married pretty young, and continued to buy. Moved to Dallas, continued to buy small properties, but I was kind of at the point where I was doing consulting at the time, IT consulting, had an IT firm that I started in 2008 as well. Kind of those things where it would take me a few years to save up enough money, and I could buy like a single family here in Texas where I was buying. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to run out of years. It's not going to work. So a friend of mine was actually syndicating a deal, just a fancy word for raising capital for multiple people to kind of do like group purchasing. And I invested my retirement funds in there. And I'm like, it seems like that kind of makes a lot of sense, go bigger. So we were focusing on kind of 100-plus unit properties. And We invested in, I think, 3 deals kind of that way passively, just all through retirements in a short period of time. And my IT business was doing, I would say, relatively well, but not like, you know, a lot of IT firms, but enough to live a pretty decent life. But I was working typically 90 plus hours a week. I would sleep lots of times 3 hours a night, like not just like for projects. So 20 years of consulting, I never had a day where I didn't have a project that I was assigned to. People are like, that's great. I'm like, not really. You know, I don't know if it's great. So, because I was always like, hey, I don't know when the next buck's going to come, so I need to always take every opportunity. Plus, I learned that I ended up doing too much stuff on my own. I could have paid people at the time $10, $12 an hour, but I'm like, well, if I'm capable of doing it, I'm going to do it. So kind of lesson learned there is it's okay to pay people to do things, and you can work on better things. But it caused problems with my wife when I was working so many hours, never really home. I was home, I was like totally distracted. I worked, 7 days a week without, fail, go on vacation, work. So she's like, this is not going very well. So I said, what do you want to do? So we ended up looking at doing syndications on our own, and that's kind of where we started. And we ended up focusing typically on the 100-plus units, but we looked at a lot of things in between there. Looked at a bunch of franchises, looked at self-storage, looked at all these different investment opportunities, and we landed ultimately on multifamily, and that was 2015, and that's what we've been doing full-time since then. It took me about a year or so to leave my IT business full-time, and then just focused 100% on multifamily.
So in 16 is when you kind of
Yes.
left the consulting business
Yes.
and did that. And
So I have a customer, it's weird, so I have a customer from maybe 2013, 14-ish that still exists, and they have a product that I built. It didn't pay that much, but it's enough to buy a nice car if you want per year, and they just keep paying. So I'm like, okay. I don't do a single thing on it.
Yeah.
you don't
So
know.
then I'm thinking back to myself, like, man, I wish I would have spent the time back then, and the money, I should say, on branding and marketing, because it was a really cool product. But I just was like, I'm not going to spend money on marketing and things like that. So product never really went where it should have went.
So residual income from that.
Correct.
That's good. That's always good. Which, multifamily is a residual, a passive income, if
Right.
you will, right? So that's what a lot of people get into it, and you hear a lot of people retiring from their career and going into multifamily. And one of the things that I've always said about that is you don't really retire because
Right.
it's just you're transitioning into a
Right.
new job, right?
Right.
So that's something that I've always found interesting. Oh, retire in 2 to 5 years or whatever. I'm like, you don't retire. You're just switching your job to something new.
Typically.
So,
And if you have enough money, obviously, like anyone, you can. But I don't know what you really would do if you just strictly retired. I'm not sure what you would do, like, all day long. But like you said, people will switch from a W-2. I've had W-2s, I've done contracting, I have multifamily, and the biggest thing I like is that, I don't have to ask anyone, if I want to go somewhere, I go somewhere. If I want to, even when I did consulting, had more leeway than a W-2, but we had projects going on all the time and these certain deadlines, and I'd be like, and I had to kind of be there for the projects. Where now I can work anywhere I want. And I don't really have to ask, hey, if I want to go to Florida, do I need permission other than maybe my wife? Who, it's like nobody else has to give me permission to do that.
I'm pretty sure she doesn't say no.
No, she won't. She won't. Son and I just went to California without her, but that's okay. She didn't want to go. So
Well, and being in multifamily, you're an entrepreneur, so it's
Right.
just like anything else in business. As an entrepreneur, it ebbs and flows, and there's times where you're at home a lot. There's
Right.
times where you're around to do things, vacation and all of that, and then there's times where you're busy. And
That's right.
And it's if it's a busy season, then everybody has to understand it's time to work.
that's right.
Yeah, very, very true. Well, so there's a lot of doom and gloom, in the industry, but I want to, focus on this first part is, what's going good in the industry right now? What are some positives? Let's give some, good feelings in this industry
Right.
today, because everywhere we go, these events we've been to lately are, oh my goodness, the industry's doomed.
The sky is
Yeah.
falling, and
I don't fully believe that. I think
Right.
there's some bad things going on, and we'll talk about those. But what are some positive things
Right.
that you're seeing in the industry today?
Yeah, so definitely some doom and gloom, but focus on the positives. One, properties that have been out there for a while that have fixed debt and things like that. We're selling a number of properties this year, and going to do quite well on them. I think a lot of lessons that have been learned, hard lessons, which we can talk about maybe after this, is, okay, well, yeah, everyone's complaining about what, these deals that were bought in the last 2 years, myself included, with rates going sky high and things like that, insurance going high and all those things. Like, okay, well, rather than trying to go back and fix the past, people are trying to like kick themselves, which kick myself too sometimes, but it's like, okay, use that information to make better decisions going forward. And there's no question that the inventory for deals are down 70%-ish, so a lot less deals. But those deals, if you say, well, I hate the idea that our rate, went up from 4.5% to 11%. Well, I do too. Well, there are a lot of deals you can buy on a loan assumption. We just closed one recently. And it's like, okay, what's a fixed rate? So, okay, we don't have the problem with the floating rate. There are a lot of areas where you focus on where the insurance, costs aren't out of control and things like that. So there are deals out there. There are deals that have to be sold, meaning if it's going back to the lender if this person doesn't sell it. So there are going to be opportunities for sure. And again, all the things people are complaining about, it's like, well, you can actually eliminate almost all those variables. So if you have a loan, we had loans like a year ago under contract, and then a few months the rates went up like 300 basis points, right? That's like, okay, well that's gone. I mean, yeah, the Fed just increased rates, but you don't have to go under contract today. As of today, we're talking and say, I think rates could go up 300% between now and the next 3 months. No, I don't think so. I put almost all the money I have on that statement. But so the variables that were there before are less. And if you buy an assumable loan, you take it over, you have the loan, I take your loan over from you, I get the fixed rate. But also the other big thing that was happening right before closing, like last year, we get a lender and they'd say, okay, your proceeds got cut by $1.5 million like 2 days before closing. Well, if you're assuming a loan, they're not cutting your proceeds. You know exactly what they are. So those variables that had existed, and we got, somebody want to say gotchas and got in trouble on some of those things. There are certain deals out there you can pretty much eliminate all those variables. You can't eliminate every variable. You have, things known knowns, right, and unknown knowns, and it's like, okay, well, I don't know what's going to happen. Can I really push rents? I don't know. But most of the issues have been related to debt, insurance, and property taxes. So there are deals you can buy today where you have no issues knowing exactly what the debt's going to be when you close. It's a known. Insurance, we know the areas, because we're in 14 states, we know the areas that are kind of out of control and where there's relief. Either already came or it's not coming. I don't want to buy there anymore. And same with property taxes. So I think the positives are, if you're just getting into it, ignore all the noise from the past, other than using that to make better decisions going forward, and buy those deals. And then the other kind of unrelated to that, we've bought some, as you know, right, through Heritage, some very large CapEx deals. I'm talking 0% occupied, 30% occupied, things like that. So you can still buy those, especially if you had your background. You could probably very well do it. But if you're not a contractor, things like that. So I use those decisions to go, hey, we did really well on all those deals. But we also, like during COVID, we got hurt way worse because you couldn't really evict and you couldn't really rehab. So tons of things positive. You still get depreciation. It's gone down a little bit this year. It might come back. But it's still very good for depreciation allocation. The rates, relatively speaking, for those loan assumptions are still very attractive. You will have to raise money like for CapEx. So if you buy a property that maybe isn't quite as distressed, your CapEx budget's a little bit lower. You're essentially using all the information from all the things in the last 18 months and go, all the things I don't like, and then 90% of those things I can buy a new deal today, and all those are gone because they're already they're not variables anymore. So, and I mean, we just talked about it even, before the podcast. I mean, the housing market in certain parts, it's called single family, is crazy. We're getting above offers on a house we're selling right now. We got, 8 offers in 2 days. So it's a little, and the rates are high, right? So multifamily, I would say, is still very competitive, but it's lower. There's no question it's gone down in value, but it hasn't gone down in some cases like you would probably expect based on the rates.
And I would assume that, there's a lot of cash on the sidelines right now, even for multifamily still, with the right operators, right? And so, if you have an educated operator that knows what they're doing and has done success in the past and made it through this time,
Right.
through this tough time. I would assume that you're not having a lot of problems raising capital for the good deals, right? As long as all the variables are addressed and gone. So
Right.
are you seeing that?
It's
as
tougher
well?
for sure. Like you mentioned, there are less deals out there, so there's probably a disproportionate amount of capital. But I think investors that are probably less sophisticated, that's not to be negative about it, that haven't been through tough times, are less likely to put money in because all they hear is a noise.
Yeah.
And they hear the noise, oh, whatever, multifamily's bad or syndication's bad. That's complete BS.
Yep.
There are bad things that can happen, and there are bad people and things like that. But don't use those things to look at a deal today that, like I said, doesn't have all those negative variables, and you can make really good investments today. Cash flow is going to be a little bit lower. But we just finished a raise on a deal. It was tougher than it had been historically, and I know a guy that raises, full time, and he said it's been tougher for sure. So I think, there's a lot of noise right now about syndication, but I look at it going, okay, look at the money market guys, your money managers. They get paid no matter what. They're not going to help put money into a stock that's falling. I mean, it's a complete wrong mindset. So the sophisticated investors that understand, really investments, they don't have a problem. It's the ones that are all they're hearing is a negative noise from media that's causing the problem.
Yeah. The other thing we've been talking about too is operationally we've been seeing, like, since the deal flow is a little bit lower right now, and people, some of the deals aren't moving as quickly, so some people are stepping back a little bit and
Right.
focusing on operations. And in my opinion, that's good. I see improvements being made, and like operationally structures being put in place that when deal flow does open back up at a higher rate than it is now, then everybody's going to operate their properties more efficiently and more money is going to be made.
I mean, that's a great point. I mean, so starting, at the beginning of the year, we started bringing asset management in-house, and the asset managers we brought in can't do anything else. They can't go find deals. They can't raise capital. 100% asset management. Like you said, we're a lot more focused on operations, and I would just, when times are great, you can do almost anything, right, and things will work. Times aren't. That's where you're going to see some of the asset managers, which we've seen too, right? That hey, they're too inexperienced. We've had to remove asset managers on certain deals. So, personally, I wouldn't invest in a deal unless you have an asset manager that is 100% dedicated to asset management. I wouldn't have an asset manager that has, if they're a syndicator going to find deals and raise capital and all those other things, it's going to be too much of a distraction, and we've seen where it's been a problem. But operational-wise, it's also the property management companies are getting a little bit, it's a little bit better, but you have to hound them. And I can tell you just from, we have 20 property management companies we use across our portfolio, unfortunately. You have to hound them, and they make mistakes all the time.
Yep.
And their data is, wrong sometimes as far as what's available, what's not available, the rent amounts. So you need asset managers, been there, done that. And they're just the things where people, even if they're not trying to do something deliberately wrong, they just don't have the knowledge or experience to know how to handle something like an insurance claim, and they do really silly things that cause problems for me because they're doing silly things around a topic they have no idea what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, we've seen too where asset management hasn't had a tight enough grip on the property, and then the property management team has a little too much say, and
Right.
then things happen.
That's right. Yeah, the property management company works for you if you own the property. Yeah, you have to be reasonable, but if there's somebody there on site that isn't performing and you don't like them, then you have the ability to say, I don't want that person there. You're paying for their payroll.
Yeah, and I experienced recently on a property we worked on, they were assuming they were 85% occupied, and all these data pointed to that, and new property management came in, and they were actually 60% occupied, and it was a large property, and so they were scrambling, going, what are we going to do with all these vacancies?
Right.
And then with the 65% that they had, like another 5 to 7% were so delinquent that we're
Right.
never going to catch up. So, that puts them, in the 50s.
Right.
And you're like, oh my goodness. So
Right.
having to recoup from some of the bad property management that you trusted that management company to do this for you, and then now they're not doing their job that you
Right.
thought they were doing, or the reports were
Oh,
wrong.
yeah.
It's hard.
It's that, and just back to your point about the occupancy, it's not just the PM companies, also sellers. You think everyone should be, legit and up, but I would say at least 20% of the deals, sellers, I'll say flat out lie. I don't think it's an accident, lie about the occupancy.
Hiding vacancies.
Vacancies. So, people, you have a credit. We'll get a credit for vacant units that aren't ready and things like that. But we've had a number. They certify. They sign a certified rent roll at closing, saying this is what it is, and it's kind of to the best of their knowledge and et cetera. And people are like, well, I'll just go sue them. It's like, well, you're probably going to get nothing, right? And you're going to spend all this money and time and thing like that. But that's an issue at closing. And then the PM companies, what you have to do really is you have to force them on a cycle to check every single unit, occupied or not. And we've had properties before where they just don't do that, and people are living there for free, or there's some meth lab going on, you name it, right? It's going on there, tattoo thing going on. These are all legit things, and it's like, well, and they need to be doing that anyways, because something could happen. You could have a leak in there before you know it, the whole thing's mold. So that you need a routine for that, which a lot of PM companies they don't want to do it. One, they're going to say, oh, that's a distraction because I should be leasing. Well, that's one of the most important things you could do is understand where you really are physically. And to your point, people living there for free, I mean, it's costing you money. You might as well have it vacant, so.
Well, then then you have some property management companies or some ownership give free rent to managers, leasing agents, maintenance staff, and stuff like that. And they count those as occupied units,
Right.
even though there's no rent coming in
Right.
from them. And then you don't really know that sometimes because they hide it in their reports.
That's right.
And that's always a big deal. So I know Hayden, running our DD department is, becomes friends.
Due diligence,
with
by the
yeah,
way.
Due diligence, yep. He's asking the maintenance guys, who lives here, who does that. He's kind of befriending them the whole time he's there
Right.
and trying to find out some of this data. And then they don't really know that they're telling him who's going to tell the new owner.
Right, for sure.
But he's, just kind of getting some data from
Yeah.
them. And in the end, it exposes some of the stuff that goes
Right.
on. And it happens way more than we think it happens. Or
It does.
friends are living there, or they're running drugs
yeah.
out of this unit or in
Right.
that unit. So it's crazy what some of the stuff that you see out there today. So, what about lending? Let's talk about the negatives
sure.
of lending today. I mean, where are you seeing that? You seeing some changes on the positive for that, or is it still pretty negative? Right?
Yeah, what I would say, I'll talk about existing deals first, because I think that's where a lot of the issues are. They're not with new deals being bought, because you buy a new deal today, you know what the lending is, right?
Yeah.
And we'll talk about kind of what it looks like. But existing deals today, in my opinion, if you can refi out of a floating rate deal, even if you have like a rate cap, which is like an interest rate protection, and a lot of those rate caps are worth quite a bit of money. So if you go out of a floating rate into a fixed rate deal, you can sell your rate cap, and we have deals that are worth, $500,000 to $1 million plus for just a rate cap that can be sold to the market. When you go to fixed debt, that's 100% that comes to you and your money. There's a small fee that goes to the person that orchestrates it, but it's like $5,000. So if you can go to fixed debt, I would really recommend, and that could be, Fannie, Freddie. There are some fixed bridge to bridge, which was very, very unusual in the past, but it can happen now. And then HUD. HUD historically has been not quite as popular. We've been through it before on a couple of deals, but we're looking at HUD quite a bit because of the fact that their proceeds are much higher than Fannie and Freddie right now as a general statement.
Okay.
And it's 35-year amortization, so that's how they get the higher proceeds. No interest only, though. Unfortunately, typically there is like a 10-year prepayment penalty that goes down 1% per year. But if the rate goes down during your ownership, and when you have the HUD loan, you can also once a year lock into a lower rate if it goes down. That's cool. So there's some real, there's not one solution for every property, but, we looked at a deal where HUD was, it's like $1 million more in proceeds. I mean, it sounds like a lot, but it's a $20 million loan. And Freddie was, within $1 million. In this case, I think Freddie makes more sense because the interest only and things like that. So, end of the day, if you have a property today, there's some information I think you need to know regardless. You already know what your debt is. Do you have a rate cap or not for protection? You need to know what your property's worth. I'm not going to sell it. Well, it doesn't matter if you're going to sell it or not. You know it's worth today. You know it's going to be worth when it's stabilized. Two very different numbers. And that information is going to become critical, especially if they update it. So you want to update it 3 months from now, right? They already have it done. They can do it quickly. So you want to get that, pretty frequently. And if you're at a position where you're like, well, oh my goodness, we're going to be short on the mortgage. We need to pick a number, $500,000 in over the next, 5 months, 6 months. But if we get it stabilized, the property's going to be worth $4 million more. Well, from a just pure investment standpoint, that makes sense to do that. So you want to make sure you know that. You want to, just because the way you're running a property today for lending doesn't necessarily mean that's the same way that the lenders will underwrite the deal. So if you have an expense that's really, really low for whatever reason, lenders don't necessarily say, well, okay, they're going to use their own numbers for that. So definitely want to try to get to fixed debt if you can, or sale if you can sell it. I think on some deals right now, without a doubt, if you're a little bit struggling on your mortgage and things like that, probably different podcasts kind of how to handle that, because there's, the FDIC and Fed put out a 90-page report around lenders, what they should be doing for borrowers and things like that. But there's a lot of things you can do today to at least have the information to make decisions, because what happens usually is you're like, oh my gosh, now we need money. What do we do? And if your solution is, hey, we need money and we're just bleeding money and there's no business plan to get out of it, and or if we get it stabilized, it's not worth, the money. You put $1 million in to get $500,000, it makes no sense to do that. Right. So you might have to cut your ties. It's just reality. People are like, well, how can that be? It's like, okay, let's look at the multi-billion-dollar REITs over the last 6 months that have been just literally turning keys over to lenders every week. Yeah. So how can it be? Well, there's a lot of reasons we just talked about. The interest rate environment, property taxes, insurance, those are all reasons why. So now current loans, like getting a new loan, the bridge loans are really, really expensive right now, 10, 11%. Now, if you had a huge CapEx deal, like, hey, we have to put, $30,000 a door, you might still want to do bridge because they're probably going to get that money in your loan, right? And you're like, hey, we get out of it in 18 months and get into something fixed. I'm shying away from any of those deals right now. I just don't want to be in that situation. And then on Fannie and Freddie, typically what happens is people are like, well, the proceeds are lower. I mean, some proceeds are 50%, 60%, or before it would be, 70, 75. Some of the bridge we're getting 80. Wow. So those are things like that. So, but if you bought a deal today and you said, well, I have 50% leverage and my, it cash flows, and okay, so be it. Your leverage is low, okay, but it cash flows. Cash flow is probably going to be much lower than it was before, at least for a couple of years. So lending is still happening. They're scrutinizing things more than I've ever seen, like by far, which is probably a good thing, reality. But the number of questions coming back even on a refi today is literally insane from the agencies that are going to give loans. But they're still doing loans. We're doing refis. We're not doing a lot of purchases right now. Refis. We're doing some sales. So people are buying these properties. Most people that are buying them, they want to go to the fixed debt. So you're going to have to typically be 90% or more at occupancy for 90 days or more, and kind of maintain that. So it's still happening. Rates, closer to 6%. I mean, it does vary. I mean, on kind of a daily basis, but you figure around 6% for a Fannie and Freddie. Probably max 60% leverage. Probably not going to get, unless you're just getting a killer deal. Probably won't get higher than that. Interest only. I mean, it can be 1 year by default, 7 years, interest only, which can make a big difference. So it's still happening. People are like, well, if the rate's higher, why would I buy? It's like, well, if you could buy one today, and then you can also do like maybe a supplemental loan in the future, rates go down, or refi out of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, because there was something I was on, and there were three of us on, they're kind of talking, and one of the guys like, well, I would never buy anything right now. The one guy had made a statement like, well, if I found a deal that cash flowed pretty nicely, even at 5%, I would buy it because I'm buying it on a cost per door basis. And I think that, eventually we know rates will go down for sure.
Yeah.
When, I don't know.
Right.
So per unit pricing, and the other guy's like, well, I would never do that. I'm like, I would do it all day long.
Yeah.
The variables aren't there.
I have a customer that purchased a property, didn't go through lending at all, raised 100% of the capital for the purchase and for the CapEx.
Right.
And their goal is, after CapEx is done in 12 to 18 months, they go to lending at that point because they're occupied, all CapEx is done, and now it's just a cash flow game at that point. So
it's not other than the amount of money you have to bring to the table. And in some cases, maybe not so much today, but in the past, it's more expensive to bring an investor in than a lender. If a lender, let's say at the time, was charging 4.5%, I would pay 4.5%, then pay like a 15%, IRR to an investor. So, but times are different now.
Yeah,
they are. So if you can do that, it might make sense to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's pretty interesting talking to them about that strategy. I'm like, I've never heard of it before.
Well, I talked to a guy yesterday in a group, and he's looking at potentially talking to somebody about the exact same thing, getting his lender out completely. CapEx we already have done, but he wants to get somebody that has $15 million and put it in as a loan and pay him some sort of coupon. It's backed by the property, just like a lender.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Same thing, just different money.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've talked about some of the good stuff in the industry right now, some of the not so good stuff. Where are the opportunities? So guys that are kind of sitting on the sideline right now, looking for something to do, what are they going to do?
Yeah, some people just sit on the sidelines all day long. They did it during COVID.
Yep.
Personal opinion, big mistake, but that's, my opinion. And they just sit there, and people are like, oh, I knew this was going to happen. Yeah, but you've been saying it for 6 years. So you missed out on 5 years of opportunity. So, but you happen to be right now. So opportunities, in my personal opinion, right now, there's a lot less inventory. It's down a lot. But brokers, so we have really good broker relationships, been doing a long time. But let's just say Dax is brand new to multifamily. Never been, and he's like, I want to go find deals from brokers, 100 unit plus. And he starts reaching out to brokers and, okay, what's your background? Have you ever done a multifamily deal? No. They're going to get no attention at all, right? Reality is that they're going to go to their top, 4 or 5 buyers. But with that said, brokers have more time right now than ever to at least build those relationships. And you're still going to need somebody, in my opinion, that can kind of go alongside with you, that's had experience just for the, credibility piece of it. But brokers are much more willing to spend time with you, talk to you, because they're hurting. There's no question about it. They're hurting financially, but they have more time than they've had before. If you're going to look at properties in an area, then you want to actually go there and meet the broker face to face and actually look at a property. You're like, well, I don't like that. I don't want that property that they're selling, or like, it doesn't matter. You're going there they're going to show it to you. Right? So whether you like it or not, you're going to learn something by going. You're going to build a relationship there. The other opportunity, if you have capital, whatever, whether you're going to buy new multifamily or not, but if you have capital and you want to come into somebody's deal, you hear the term, recap capital and things like that, just big distress, but it's like interest rate distress, right, deal. So a lot of people are trying to put funds together for that. I would say a lot of them are putting them together and not executing. I've seen it firsthand. So if Dax had a problem with a property and he's like, hey, I need $2 million, and like say Dan has $2 million, he's like, I'll put it in, and you sit in front of everybody else. So if you want to invest money right now in multifamily, secure multifamily, the unknowns are already known for the most part because the property's already closed. Maybe it's been running for a year, so you don't have all those variables anymore. Dax's property running for a year. Yeah, it's running a deficit. He needs $100,000 a month. Okay, but you know that. You go into it, you fund that, you sit in front of all the other investors. You might even take a piece of the GP to do it, or all the GP. Don't know. It depends how much you bring in versus the equity. The more opportunities right now in that area, or let's just say more needs for that, whether people are going to participate in that or not. I don't see a lot of people participating in it like they should. But it's a big area right now.
it's a big opportunity out
Well,
there.
you think about, let's say you brought $10 million of equity to a deal, and you need $2 million to survive. Well, the people in there will be like, well, I'll put $2 million in because I already put 10 in. Well, okay, but somebody new coming in says, I put $2 million in and sit in front of 10. Okay, maybe I'm willing to do that. But
To save
it.
Yeah.
But even in that situation, there's certain things you need to look for. I wouldn't just willy-nilly put money in. You need to understand what the relationship with the bank is. When is the loan coming due? Does it have a rate cap? Those are things you need to know. And then just kind of what's the business plan and what's worth today if you sold it.
Yeah, and what we've talked about before is the people.
Right.
Who's on the property, who's managing the property,
Right.
who's property managing, asset managing.
How long have they been there? Are they new? Are they? Because that'll make or break the deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it losing money because they're operating it poorly?
Right.
And so that's when the experience comes in and partnering with the right opportunity, I would
Right.
say. So with that, I mean, I know that running TMF is not the easiest job in the world. We'll call it that. I know it has its struggles, and you've done a really good job with creating a family environment. What I like to say about it is I call it the coffee shop of syndication groups, because most of the syndication groups out there are either guarded or with their information and all that.
Right.
And I feel like everybody in TMF family is really very open, want to help one another.
Right.
I mean, you have people out there that aren't even a part of the deal, don't get a part of the GP, align funding for it, or
Right.
travel out there for DD just to help one another. It's a real cool family environment that
Right.
you don't get with a lot of syndication groups. But what was your reasoning for starting it back in the day when you started it? Because I'm sure it wasn't because you wanted another job.
No. And in fact, if you would have asked me probably a year before we started it, or any years before that, would we ever consider even doing kind of an educational program, if you want to say, and I would have been 100% no, like zero. IT, CPA guy, no desire to do any of that stuff. Really through some circumstances of having, in my personal opinion, a bad mentor, frankly, that caused us to kind of go on our own. And we're like, we think we could do things in a more fair way, like you said, better culture in our personal opinion, and not just self-serving. And so we started, people were asking us to do it too. So we ended up first doing like webinars, hour, and then like meetups, and then, half-day event, and then turned into kind of full-fledged. But I don't say this just, I know you guys are both Christians too. I don't just say it just to say it. But there are very few things in my life where I was like, this, like I really felt, and to me and my wife really felt like this is something that you need to do. And I can tell you, neither of us wanted to do it. I'm not just saying that like, oh, we kind of want to do it. We did not want to do it at all. But we were, say, obedient. I can't say I've done that, been obedient in every single situation. This one, we were obedient in the situation and said, okay, we took time away. The first year was horrible. We didn't spend much time with our kids, frankly. We just didn't, and it's kind of working like I was IT days again. So man, this is bad.
It's one of the seasons.
Right, like you talked about earlier, the season, and then it turned out to be where, kind of fell in love with it. We got a lot of good friends from the group, and we've been able to talk to people not just about, multifamily, but maybe they're struggling with something like on marriage or whatever, and we can at least provide our advice and things like that, or our input on it. So that's been really cool. But like you said, it's not, it was easier before. This year's tough. There's no question about it. And, people are more frustrated than ever, which I totally understand. But I look at it, you're going to really learn to see who are people you want to partner with in the future. A lot of people have no problem participating when things are really good. Times get tough, they clam up, they don't participate, they use excuses. They want you to wrap it up in a bow and make sure everything, is 100% before they participate. And frankly, it just doesn't work that way.
Sure.
If this is a business, requires money. Sometimes you have to put money in, and you might actually lose that money. It's just reality. So for us, it was really more, we saw we felt other syndication groups were doing. Didn't like it. I also do all the coaching, one-on-one coaching, so we don't have a sub-coach model. Not to say we never would do that, but we haven't done it since we started it. And I'm super accessible. I can't tell you how many people will be I joined this group, I'd never get a hold of, so-and-so. I joined the group, Dax is a leader of it, and I'm talking to Dan, and Dan has done no deals, that type of stuff. We wanted to avoid that.
Let me just say this on that. That is, like, personally my biggest pet peeve is people that do not respond quickly. And in my life, in my experience, the people that respond quickly are the successful people that I know in my life.
Right.
And you are one of those guys that if I was to call you, you would either answer or text me back very quickly when you're going to call me back.
Right.
And that's important.
It is. And I don't understand people don't do it.
Yeah. It's very common in this industry as a whole. I've seen it in this industry is, people just don't respond. But that is one thing I do pride myself on as well is responding.
You are.
And, if you're on a call, just call you back when I get a second.
Right.
And, you're going to forget every now and then occasionally.
But
1
out of 100.
Yeah.
In all reality, but 1 out of 100.
But if you pride yourself on being responsive and responding to people, you're going to attract like-minded people in that setting. And so, or if they're not like-minded, they will become like-minded because they see the value in it.
And I know people in the group, if they're going through a deal, for example, the first time, I know very rarely will you hear me say, this is actually a big issue. Very rarely will I say that. And we've had it, a few times here and there. But if they're texting me or calling me and they're doing the first deal as an example, it could be freaking out, right? And I want to be able to at least, I'll tell them, hey, if this is your biggest worry, don't worry about it.
Talk them off the ledge.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Like I said, but a handful of times where I'm like, this is a big deal.
So we know that you have some other interests other than just real estate. One that I wanted to ask you a question about. So you think I'm going to say cars? I was thinking about that, but so I lift a weight here and there. I try to move them around a little bit and try to stay. So I try to stay healthy, mind, body, spirit, everything, every aspect of life. Family life, business life. Stay balanced, stay healthy, and I know that obviously if the camera's not picking it up. Mark's got some size. I mean, he's
small dude, but just
small height, but very well built. And I wanted to know, like, what motivates you in that area.
I asked myself this. My son's like, I think you have something wrong with you, Dad. He's like, I think, no joke. He's like, I think you need to go see like a psychiatrist because you're upset. I'm like, it doesn't impact me like as far as in a negative way. My biggest thing was when I was young. I used to work out from like 14 to like 24. I stopped for like 20-some years, but I always had like a lot of like pain. Like I had joint pains. I felt like I kind of had arthritis, stuff like that. So when I was like, let's say 7 years ago, whatever it was, I worked at this guy I was training with. He's like, well, try this diet, whatever, for like 40 days. And I'm like, okay. And I started feeling like way better. Not like people are like, I did this and woohoo, yeah. I'm like, but my pain level, joints went like way down. Inflammation was kind of crazy. And I think I've been thinking more about this, like why am I so? Because I don't miss. Like I go every day, and because I feel weird mentally if I don't go. So I always do something. And I think it's like, it's the one thing in my life I have total control over. Mm-hmm. I actually think that's why, because I don't have to rely on anyone else.
Yep.
I don't like relying on other people because they fail lots of times. And I'm kind of like, and as you get older, right? So like, well, I'm getting older too. So I want to be like, my son and I just worked out with, a lot of people wouldn't know who he is, Frank Zane. He's a 3-time Mr. Olympian, beat Arnold. But we went to California, worked out with him. He has a thing you can do with him, So like he's 81 and he's still very active. And I said, well, I want to be active. I want to be better shape than him when I'm 81. I want to be, right? And it's like, well, to me, people are like, oh, you just do it the way it looks. Like, no, I feel better mentally when I do it. My body feels way better. I have very, very little pain. Like, I rarely ever have pain. And just my eating habits have been more where I eat clean. People think, oh, you must, like, eat just a little bit. I don't eat a lot of food, but I'm not hungry either. But there's no question, because I tell you in the last month, I've been thinking about it a lot more, like, well, I'm so whatever. And I think it's the control thing.
Yeah.
And just that I can, if there's something that, you know, if I want to eat junk all day long, okay, that's my fault, right? But if I don't eat junk all day, that's my fault too, right?
Yeah. Well, and not everybody has to go out. I want everybody to be fit and healthy and you know, mentally, emotionally, physically, all that. But you don't have to go out and you know, cut calories and get to where every vein's popping out of your arm over there. But just, you know, get in shape and feel proud of yourself and motivated in the morning and full of energy and life and like you said with the eating. I mean, that's literally I've been lifting weights for since my first back surgery, and the doctor cleared me to lift weights. That was 15 years ago, maybe. I don't know exactly what, but I've not always eaten well. And when I eat well, it's 80% of it. 20% is the gym, 80% is the eating part.
And there are so many, I didn't think this before, and unfortunately my son Ty is really into like food and like in a good way, right? So we have found so many like good options. Like I make my own bread. You're like, oh, I'm like, it takes me 5 minutes, I'm not joking, to put all the ingredients in there and turn it on. It takes 3 hours to cook or whatever. But and all, a lot of stuff I do is just one ingredient and stuff like that. So it's kind of like there's so many good options now that you can substitute. He has like cocoa or sugar or something like that. It's not sugar. It's like coconut sugar. Like, I never heard of it. Thai, okay. But you can use that as a substitute. So, but yeah, I think it's a mental thing for me more than anything. Yeah, nice break.
Well, and we want to be around for our kids, our grandkids, and be able to keep up with them. And that's a motivation for me for sure. I don't want to not be able to be there.
Yeah,
so.
And I think people need to realize. I mean, we're all like, if you want to say older, right? But people that are younger, if you lifted 15 years ago, you probably did some lifts like you're kind of like. Today you probably shouldn't do. You might still do it.
I would never the Olympic lifts and stuff that I used to do. I would. I'm done.
I think people need to realize that if you want to be lifting, or be in shape when you're 80 years old, like I used to go really heavy for me, if you want to say, but now it's usually 8 to 12 reps. That's it. Why? Because I want to keep lifting. I 2 months ago or so, I was lifting with a guy. He's 80 pounds heavier than me. We worked out together before, and I, was going too heavy and, tore my pec. Fortunately, it was like a 2 out of 10. So, I mean, it didn't really prevent a lot of things, but I'm like, you know what? That was stupid.
Yep.
I shouldn't have done that. So, just be in it for the long haul.
Yep.
Yeah. That's really good. Well, what other hobbies you have or interests do you have that you like to talk about?
I like cars. I know you're saying cars. Yeah. I don't know why. It's actually my one vice. And I wish I didn't like cars, kind of, actually.
Classic.
So do you have a shop, right, where you restore cars?
Yeah, so I was able to fortunately buy into like a rest-a-mod shop. We take mostly 60s cars and restore them to where they're completely everything's brand new.
That's awesome because I like the look of old cars, but I don't like the old gears and all of that.
No,
so
everything
Resto-Mods is the way for me.
Rest-a-mod. Yep, for sure. So I like both, unfortunately. I wish I just liked one or the other. So all things being equal, I don't know. Emotion-wise, I probably would pick a 60s. But like pure driving, I do like the exotics better, pure driving.
Yeah.
60s, you're only get, like I have one being built. It's like a new frame, new motor, new transmission. Everything's new, right? But it's not going to drive like an exotic. But it'll look cool.
But it'll look really cool.
And it will be one of a kind by far. It won't be going around like this one because it's doing a bunch of stuff to it. So
that's awesome.
I like both. But it's one of those things where I grew up really little, just being like loving cars. And we didn't have internet back then, so we just go to a bookstore and I'd spend just all this time looking through books. At the time, it was like the Lambo Countach, which was kind of the car in the 80s and stuff like that. My dad loved cars though. He never really got one truly that. I could look, kind of wish we would have had the money to buy him something before he passed away. But it was one of those things where he got like a Cadillac, but it was used. That was his dream car. But he always loved cars. He would drive
Yep.
through the parking lots of dealerships, and I would be like,
Well, and it's contagious because me and all of my boys like cars. So, even my youngest son, he
Yeah.
can see the front end or a corner of a car and
Yeah.
be like, "Oh, that's
yeah.
what that is." Yeah.
Oh yeah, they're amazing to me.
Yeah.
There are too many options out there though now. That's the problem.
They're awesome. Well, one last thing I wanted to talk about is I know we talk about our kids and how we like to get them involved in our businesses and bring them to events and different
Right.
things like that. And your kids are obviously involved in your business to a degree. We just did a podcast recently with our kids, just talking about the younger generation coming into it. And I think you model that well with TMF. What would you say to a 21-year-old you
Yeah.
or the 21-year-old out there that
Yeah.
might be listening to talk to them about the industry? And
Yeah.
what advice would you have for them?
Yeah, our kids have grown up in it for sure, and mixed to see what will happen with it. But Ty, our son, asks a lot of questions. Our daughter goes to events. She's very social. If I ask her, hey, you want to, whatever, she's probably like, doesn't want to talk about it that much right now. She's 15. We're close, but she's a girl, wants to run around with her friends and stuff like that. As I've invested more, whether it's multifamily or any other investment, really, a couple of things. One, I wish I would have known more about the way banks work, meaning more how banks make their money and how private equity works. I think if anyone was going to get in, if they said, hey, I wanted to get a job, and what space do you think makes the most sense if they want to be an entrepreneur and an investor and things like that, I would go work for a private equity firm, hands down. Second, I'd probably go work with, if you were really a multifamily, I'd go work with a broker. Probably. I would skip the other aspects of it, unless you have a passion for property management, you probably don't.
Right.
But the private equity guys, if you really look the way they invest, just like banks, the way they position themselves to reduce risk, where they sit in you have to go out the capital stack when they get paid ahead of everybody else, not just like their fees and stuff like that, but like when there's a refi, they get made whole first. So what they're trying to do is turn their money as fast as they can. Now, it usually requires a big check. So say someone puts in $5 million, their whole goal is, they're going to charge you fees up front, maybe even at the backside, and then they're going to try to get their money back in 2 years and take that $5 million and then charge someone else fees again, get it back 2 years. But the space as a whole for multifamily, if I was to go back, I would say I would look at assets that were less distressed, even though some of the deals we've done really, really well on. But I think just some of the headaches and the concerns and stress related to that and variables, and try to look for deals that they're going to be a little bit lower returns as a whole, but just accept that and go, okay, there's a balance between, investors calling you nonstop about a deal that's in distress, right? And versus like, okay, we thought we're going to pay 8%, we're paying at 2%. Okay, I get it. Not great, but you're not having to put money into the lender and things like that. So buying better assets that essentially have less variables. Yeah. Like the knowns are there. Like will the property survive, if the business plan was not met? And a lot of deals, the answer is yes, and other deals, no. Like we bought deals in Savannah right before COVID, and they required, 100% re-tenanting and 100% interior rehab. We couldn't do either. Yeah. The judge there was a complete jerk, wouldn't let you evict, and we couldn't do CapEx. Okay, that's a problem. So I'm all about, if we've gotten through more things, eliminating the variables. Yeah. You're always going to have things that are unknown. But if you can eliminate as many of those things up front, even like, okay, should we get a rate cap or a fixed rate or this, okay, maybe this rate's a little bit higher right now, and you could look at in a year later, oh, I wish I wouldn't have got that. Well, you know what? You could be doing the opposite and saying, oh my gosh, now the rate. Exactly. Yep. So don't beat yourself up too much about those decisions if you're in it for the long haul, because it'll, like the guys I said, for 7 years people are telling me how multifamily is, and now they're tooting the horn. Told you. Yeah, well, you had literally lost, I think we calculated, lost out like on, whatever, $50+ million of distributions, and it's like, so yeah, I can be on this podcast today and I'll be on it tomorrow and tell you two different things and come back and say, look, I was right. Yeah, I was one of those days. So yeah, but it's and then just surrounding yourself. Don't get so enamored with somebody because they have money potentially, because you don't know how they got it. You don't really know. And in all things being equal, pick only those people. You're never going to be 100% right, unfortunately. But if there's a red flag at all, don't do business with them at all. And
Yeah.
I've had people even on the IT side that I was doing business with. He actually screwed over some people I knew, but he didn't screw me over yet. I'm like, well, okay, you know, I was kind of locked in with him, and then he stiffed me out like, $200 grand.
Yep. Yeah, well, you kind of get like a feel for somebody. I do anyway.
You do.
And if I don't have a good feeling about somebody, if I have this thing where I feel like I can trust somebody,
Right.
or I feel like I can't, and if I can't, then we're not doing business.
I would, and I would always do it to where it's deal by deal. Don't lock in early on a partnership. Like, hey, Dax and I, we just met at this whatever event. You want to do partner together? Let's get a partnership agreement. And don't do that.
Yeah.
Do it deal by deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, and always have an out, because your partner, can cause major issues for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very true. Very true.
Well, Mark, I want to thank you for coming on. Appreciate your time. For anybody out there that, obviously we said about the Think Multifamily, reach out to you, Mark. I think it'd be great for everybody to have that knowledge. But also Fire Summit. You want to mention something about that real quick?
Yes, so thanks first for having me. I really, really appreciate it. We have a fire event coming up. It's kind of a 2-day, all steps and angles of multifamily, multiple speakers. It's in Dallas. I think I would know the dates off the top of my head. It's November 3rd and 4th, I believe.
Yeah.
You guys know it probably. I actually
think-
was going one time to an event following Tammy with a moving truck because I had stuff to bring there, and I'm like, I don't even know what hotel it's at. I'm not even serious. I'm totally serious.
She does do a good job
I wasn't joking.
of organizing.
And I'm like,
this for
if
you,
I lose
so.
her on the highway, I'm going to have to call her and find
Yeah.
out what it is. So, but it's like to your point, Dax. It's culture-wise, we try to be family-friendly. Try to there's not all the hype of running up and down the aisles and jumping up and down stages. So we're not that. We're all kind of like, hey, we're in this together. We'll share lessons learned. The whole idea is for people, hopefully, not to go through some of the same pains that we've gone through,
Yep.
same mistakes we've gone through, and then to build relationships with people, because every single event, it only takes one person. You need to meet somebody, at an event to really change your life
Yep.
forever. I mean, think
Yep.
about how we met our spouses, right?
Right.
One thing happened, and then our whole life is completely different because of that one event. So same with an event, attending
Yep.
it, you can meet somebody there and
Meet
totally
great
change it.
people
Yeah.
and great conversations.
Right.
And yeah,
So it's good.
awesome.
Good. Well, thanks again.
Yep.
And we'll be seeing you soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.